What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, a Dodgers show that might actually have baseball to talk about here in the next few weeks, we think. My name's Jeff Spiegel. I'm your host tonight. I'm joined by Matt Moreno. And before we dive into the latest, Matt, you wanted to give a quick shout out to Baseballism.
Yeah, as you guys have seen, if you've been following us, the Baseballism partnered with Justin and Courtney Turner and their foundation on a Mooney on a Mission shirt. And well, I have the shirt on, and you can kind of see it here. Baseballism also sent us a hat and a bandana as well. So I think we're going to be doing a giveaway. So make sure to kind of stay tuned to our Twitter account, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, all Dodger Blue 1958, as you guys, I'm sure, are aware, and we'll get you details on that.
Yeah, that's sweet gear. I mean, sometimes you put a dog on something, it might not be the freshest looking stuff, but shout out to Justin and Courtney Turner because they put a dog on it, and it looks sweet. The hats are sweet. The bandanas are sweet. The shirt you've got on is sweet. So definitely check that out. And it's all going to a good cause, of course, if you go in their website and purchase that stuff. So definitely check it out. And hopefully for Justin Turner, with some baseball back on, maybe he can get a little more publicity for the line and some stuff going. If you've been following the news, we're recording this on Monday night, and stuff seems to be, I guess promising is maybe the word, if only because it feels like we're at the end of negotiations. It feels like baseball is definitely happening. So let me give you sort of a breakdown of the last 7 days, and then, Matt, you can give us your thoughts. It's only 7 days ago that the owners had made an offer to the players, and the players basically said, we're done negotiating. Tell us when, tell us where to show up. Of course, 2 days later, Manfred and Tony Clark of the union have a face-to-face meeting. The owners leave thinking they have an agreement. Turns out Manfred was wrong, which, although this is something that is a recurring theme, by the way, of the owners misinterpreting things in the way that they went. So that proposal was for 60 games, full prorated salaries, expanded playoffs, and the players would waive the right to grieve, which basically means they waive the right to file for a grievance hearing in which they could pursue from the LA Times, quote, perhaps $1 billion in damages. So the players are like, nah, we're good. We want to play 70 games, full prorated salaries, split the playoff revenues, forgiveness of salary advances, universal DH, waiving the right to grieve, etc. The owners say no thanks. The players then the owners come back at the last minute and try and tweak a couple things. Players are not interested. 33-5, it gets rejected. So where does it leave us? Basically, as of Monday, the March agreement that both parties signed is binding. Players get full prorated salary, which was their greatest desires. The league is going to opt for a 60-game series. There is no expanded playoffs. Both sides do maintain the right to grieve, which is not a minor thing here and definitely something to keep an eye on as far as if this relationship can get any uglier than it already has. And so I think one thing I would say just from the get-go is this whole process has been a disaster from the side of the owners. As one writer from The Ringer put it, the one thing the players have demanded all along was full prorated salaries. This jumped out at me. On May 11th, the owners offered revenue sharing. 2 weeks later, sliding scale pay cuts. 2 weeks later, 75% prorated. A week later, 80% prorated. The very first time they offered the one thing that the union said they wanted was 5 days ago. As a result, it cost them expanded playoffs, advertisements on jerseys, grievance avoidance, partnership, yada, yada, yada. They basically got absolutely nothing. They're still playing 60 games with full prorated salaries. One person pointed out it would have cost each team about $2 million just to say yes to the Players Association's latest offer. They would have gotten everything I just described. So it's absolutely insane. I think the last thing I'll say, Matt, before you jump in, is that it's unequivocally a win for the players. They're as united as they've been. They drew a line in the sand on prorated salaries, and they had held to it. They didn't cave. They look strong. The owners look terrible. And I think, as we talk about, in 18 months, there's another collective bargaining agreement conversation coming, and the players are as strong as they've ever been. I think a seed of doubt has been planted in the owner's mind about how the next negotiation goes. So the good news for fans, barring a nasty second wave that ruins everything, we're getting baseball. Yes, it's just over a third of a season, but it's baseball on our TVs in about a month. There's no expanded playoffs, thank goodness. There's baseball in 2020. Please, for the love of God, let the Dodgers be good in 2020. Matt, now that we're through all of this, it feels like we have some clarity. What jumps out to you about everything that's transpired?
Oh man, there's so much to unpack with this entire process. I mean, like you said, the owners somehow have pretty much miscalculated every single one of their steps, I think, along the way. The players, as you highlighted, were very clear about pretty much the one thing that they absolutely wanted and they wouldn't budge on. And maybe through the first week or two, if you're the owners, you kind of prod and poke around to see if there's any cracks. But like you said, the union was standing strong together. And frankly, I was a little surprised by it. I thought maybe at some
Yeah.
point we'd start to see some dissension, but they held firm. And so then at that point, to me, if you're the owners, okay, they want full prorated salaries. Fine. I think there's a number that they could have agreed to that would make it work for both parties. And from the owner's perspective, I don't want to say desperately, but they pretty strongly wanted expanded playoffs this year and next year, because they were going to go to 16 teams, which I think is ridiculous.
Awful.
I was one of the first kind of proposals or possibilities that came out also was the wild card game would be changed to a best of 3 series, which I thought, okay, like that makes sense. Add more TV revenue for the owners in the league. Still exciting. A best of 3, anything can happen, especially if in a wild card maybe there isn't necessarily a clear-cut underdog, but if the underdog wins that first game, then it's interesting, right? Game 2, and then if it's series is tied, then you have game 3, blah blah blah. So I was on board with that, but when I saw expanded playoffs for 16 teams this year and next year, I thought, no, like if you're the players, like you can't really agree to something like that. I think unless you're going to get your full prorated salaries for a healthy number of games. And when it got to the point where the owners were at 60, the players came back at 70, I think we all thought, okay, there's very clearly a middle number here. And I believe it was Jason Stark who explained why 65 wouldn't work, but 66 would, because you play everybody in your division 4 times, interleague and American League rivals. So fine. They couldn't do it for whatever reason. I guess I do feel like we've reached the finish line. We obviously haven't crossed it yet. I know Jeff Passan said tonight, Monday, that the expectation is the players will agree to reporting for spring training 2.0, camps opening on July 1st, which I didn't think would ever really be much of an issue, especially for the Dodgers. Justin Turner has done multiple interviews, and so have Chris Taylor, so have other players, saying they're still working out, obviously, in safe, kind of physical distancing and all that. But they're ready. They've been ready. I mean, and the players' whole thing was, when and where.
Yeah, exactly.
What I question, though, and we discussed a little bit off air, is in order to get the 60-game schedule that the owners have approved, that Manfred will kind of impose, the players need to agree to both sides need to agree to the health and safety protocols. Now, last we heard from Rob Manfred, he said they were close on them, right? Hopefully they are, but considering his perception of everything and what then the union has said, like, can we really take that at face value? I hope so.
Yeah.
Because if there needs to be, any sort of extended negotiations by 2 p.m. Tuesday afternoon, we might be in trouble.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, and it feels like Rob Manfred has the least understanding of what's going on in these negotiations of just about anybody, other than John Heyman and Bob Nightingale, his mouthpieces in the media. But I mean, it's like Jeff Passan has a better sense of what's going on inside the room than I think Rob Manfred does. The number of times he walks away from an agreement thinking one thing, and the owners are left pissed off because of a misunderstanding, whereas like he's the only guy in the room, is amazing. And it makes me wonder. I mean, looking at this whole thing. I agree with you. The gap between 60 and 70 games, and for them to give up as much as they did in order to get there. And I think the players finally got fed up because they said they had to be wondering in their head, is this just a stall tactic? Is Manfred just trying to drag this out as long as possible? Because if it's 60 games this week, next week it's, basically you're subtracting 6 to 7 games every week that this drags out. And so I'm grateful that finally they drew a line in the sand and said, we're done with this. But it is really fascinating to think about, like, what did the owners truly want? I remember right at the beginning, there was this debate. The players were basically like, the owners want to play a bunch of games. Now, I wonder if they were wrong. Like, I wonder if the owners genuinely are going to lose money on these games. Obviously, they haven't shown anyone their books, and I'm not saying I believe them, but the players were convinced, of course. Like one person was saying, Daniel, actually, Starkin was saying on Twitter, the owner's first proposal has only gone up by 12 games, whereas the players came down like 42 or 44. Now, I thought the 100 and whatever games the players suggested was an absolutely outrageous number, given COVID and everything else. So I have to hold my tongue a little bit there and saying how much they compromised. But it does, this whole thing looks really bad for the owners. And as you said, I think expanded playoffs were the worst part of it. So I'm curious, The players were willing to accept expanded playoffs in exchange for 10 more fully paid games. Now, you're not earning a salary based on those 10 games, but if you had to choose between 10 extra regular season games, but then you have to have expanded playoffs, as a Dodger fan, which of those two would you prefer? 60 games with no expanded playoffs or 70 with expanded playoffs?
Oh, so me personally, I'm going to take the 60
Yeah.
games and no expanded playoffs again, and it's only because to me, like 16 teams in the playoffs for baseball is just too many. If they wanted to add, like I said, if they wanted to expand the wild
Yeah.
card game to a best of three series, I had no problem with that. I was all for it. I think independent of this entire situation, maybe that's something they should consider, in the upcoming CBA.
Yeah.
And also, and we'll get into it too, the universal DH. Now, with assuming Rob Manfred does kind of unilaterally impose a season, and there isn't some 11th hour change of heart by either party to say, hey, let's actually negotiate a deal, the DH is only coming to the National League this year, which I am thrilled with. I know you are on the other side of that argument. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. The owners, to me, I don't know what did they necessarily
Yeah.
win with this deal? Just maybe they're not paying, I guess, 5 to 6 more games, because I don't think they were ever going to agree to 70 games.
Yeah.
But like I said, once it got to 60 and 70, there's no reason that 66 shouldn't have been the number.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess congratulations, owners, you saved those 6 games. What did you lose?
Yeah.
And Scott Boras, we have the article up on DodgerBlue.com. He said the MLB's reported $1 billion TV rights deal with Turner Sports that's supposed to kick in, said is the rectal thermometer of the sport, because it shows fans that business is fine.
Yeah.
There's a lot of owners trying to paint a different picture, but really baseball is a healthy sport right now.
Yeah, it is fascinating. As I said, each team roughly to get to 70 games would have cost them about $2 million. Now I think there's more than games going on, just to oversimplify things. The players weren't just asking for 10 more games. There was a lot more involved in that, but they were giving up quite a bit. The right to grieve, again, that feels almost like it would have been worth $2 million per team on its own. But you're talking about expanded playoffs, and if you're going from if you're increasing the number of playoff teams by 33% or something like that, like you're telling me that's for 2 seasons, that's not worth $2 million per franchise. I mean, that sounds crazy. Not to mention, somebody mentioned putting sponsorship patches on team. I mean, like, what would a company pay to have a patch on the Dodgers jersey? Like, I'm not in sponsorship. I have no idea, but you're not telling me that alone isn't getting us close to hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more.
Way more.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but when the Lakers put the Wish patch on their jersey, I mean, you could look that up pretty quickly. Go Google it, and you could probably figure out a number of how much they got. And you're telling me that $2 million. Now, every team's not the Dodgers. The Rays are not going to get what the Dodgers are going to get. They might not have anybody interested, for all we know. But there is a lot of sort of intricacies here, and I think like you were saying. I think the owners just misinterpreted. I think they misread the signs. I think the players basically said, whether they said it out loud or not, you've got one more offer to make us, and if it's not one we want, then we're not going to sign it, and we're just going to stop negotiating and play. And I think the owners came back with an offer that wasn't very good, thinking that things would go differently. I mean, that's just the only way I could possibly interpret that. So, with all of that said, now as of Monday night, the Rob Manfred's going to impose a season, 60 games, health and safety protocols, assuming they get signed, which Jeff Passan said they're expected to get signed. Everyone's expected to agree, but he said never say never with this whole nightmare. There's so many other factors here. I mean, we're talking about teams reporting to places where the second wave is either, this isn't even the second wave, doctor's saying. This is still the first wave. It's just us not dealing with the problem. And we don't have to get too much into that, but I mean, I think it's reasonable to ask whether or not we're even going to get through the 60 games, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And maybe will be proven wrong in the long run by the owners. Their master plan is they're banking on, because it's been reported by several national reporters. There are multiple owners who absolutely support just canceling the season outright.
Yeah.
Which is disheartening, really. So, yeah, maybe there are owners who are saying, okay, then, let's do the 60 games. Because I will say I was surprised when by reports that Manfred would impose a 60-game season. Because I thought for sure once the union said no to
Yeah,
60, that they were going to come back and say, okay, we're doing 50.
yeah, or less.
Uh, I guess, yeah, I guess maybe the caveat to that is as it gets later into the fall, are we going to lose games anyway?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's like an olive
So,
branch that's not really an olive branch. But I mean, even just listening to some of the NBA stuff, and I'm sure on Lakers Nation, there's all sorts of great coverage on that front. I mean, I know there is, but even just hearing people talk about that, I mean, you're seeing things in Florida. Now, the NBA is sending their every one of the franchises that is in the playoffs to a bubble. Now, even that bubble can't be contained because you've got employees of the resort and all that kind of thing that are going to be coming and going. But there's even skepticism within a bubble of how safe it's going to be. Now, that's in Florida, which is literally probably the worst place in the world for COVID right now. But the thing that I have never felt like got enough attention in this whole process is, if you ask me, the insanity of the fact that we are playing baseball games in home parks. The insanity that these teams are going to be hopping on planes and staying in hotels all over the place. I mean, it's nuts. It is absolutely nuts to have these players exposing themselves to the levels of risk. I understand completely not wanting to be away from family. I understand completely the fact that we're talking about months-long season versus the NBA, which is going to be basically 6 regular season games, I think, and then the playoffs. I understand the differences, but I don't think the differences are big enough to justify the risk. So as people are getting excited and I'm getting excited, and I don't want to be the Debbie Downer here, but I'm just looking at the numbers and I'm looking at the cases in Arizona and Florida. I mean, all across the country, places where it is going up. I just am skeptical of the fact that getting on airplanes and staying in hotels and traveling and doing all of those things and expecting young Major League Baseball players to make good decisions without a bubble, it worries me. It worries me, I guess is what I'll say.
yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm sure our listeners will feel like this is a familiar topic of discussion because early on, when it looked like MLB was going to have everybody in Arizona, we hopped on a show right away. We both said like, yeah, this makes sense. And that plan came out. The idea of a bubble concept was before the NBA really even set their plans in motion. And because we kind of joked that baseball is usually a bit reactionary, but here they were being progressive and at the front of everything,
Yeah.
innovating, so to speak. And yeah, I don't get it. There was a report from Jared Diamond in the Wall Street Journal that MLB is now considering possibly a bubble scenario. I don't know if how matters have unfolded between the league and union impacts that now.
Yeah.
Southern California, obviously, I know you're up in Oregon. Me being here in LA, I don't want to say it's under control. I think it's a better environment than, say, in Arizona, a Florida, a
Yeah.
Texas. There's risk, like we've said, there's risk in every scenario. That being said, a bubble concept, I think, mitigates it as much as possible.
Yeah.
And, if they came to LA, at that point, you're more or less bussing around. So at least you can control that, I think, a little bit better than sending players to airports, even though it is chartered flights.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I felt like I've been a little surprised that it hasn't really gained much traction since the initial report that Dodger Stadium, Angel Stadium, Petco Park, and maybe some college, universities, their facilities, some of the nicer ones in the area would be used. I feel like it was kind of thrown out there as, oh, they're sort of thinking about it, and then that's been it. Maybe we'll hear more once, if and when, or when those safety
Yeah.
protocols and all that are signed. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. It definitely is a concern.
And it's fascinating too, as I think about it, once the season starts. So right now you would say that like the players are the most incentivized to want to play games because the players are not getting paid any money and the owners are obviously billionaires and can withstand. But once the season actually starts, the roles kind of flip because now the owners are the ones that are incentivized because they're cash cow. They are losing money every regular season game that happens, with the expectation that once the playoff rolls around and the playoff money comes in, they're going to sort of be made whole or as close to whole as they're going to get. So it is fascinating to think that if you get 35 games into the season and something happens, the owners are going to be the ones that are going to be incentivized. And then you're going to have all these players half the teams are going to be eliminated, let's say by then, or at least like, you're on the Orioles, you're eliminated already. But it's like, you're going to be like, screw this. I'm not putting myself in risk, Like, okay, it sucks that I'm going to lose 25 games worth of salary, but I'm going to come back next year and I'll be fine. So I'll just be fascinated now because the players are the ones that are anti-bubble. Remember, it's not the owners; it's the people that have to leave behind their teams. Now, if you're 35 games in and you say, hey, we're going to do 25 games in a bubble instead of 60 games in a bubble instead of 80 games in a bubble, I mean, maybe you kind of can clamp down on the time and say, hey, we can get everybody out of here in 70 days, 25 games in the playoffs. I mean, who knows? But I do think that will be a fascinating thing to watch. Is that once. Because you know something's going to happen, right? There's going to be some situation where one team gets wiped out, so to speak, and the whole thing gets put in jeopardy. I'll be fascinated to hear what the narratives are because I think the owners are going to be the ones that want to play then. And the players, for most of them, are going to be skeptical. So it's something to watch. But one other thing I wanted to ask you about. So we're talking about 60 games. 60 games, 102 less than normal. As a Dodger fan, are you worried about that? No expanded playoffs, only 60-game regular season. Does that worry you?
And I think for any fan of a team, you have to be a little concerned just because you have obviously the fewer number of games that are played in a season, kind of the more it allows some of the lesser teams to stay within striking distance, so to speak. So you have that aspect. You also have the past few months have been unlike anything any of us have ever experienced. And it's the same thing for the NBA and those teams. Like, the Lakers obviously are the number one team in the Western Conference by 5.5 games up or whatever it is on the Clippers. But are they going to have that same rhythm when they resume in Disney World? Probably not. So for players, you have lofty expectations for Mookie Betts and Cody Bellinger, but I'm sure they've been working out. I'm not going to question that, but it's still different. Like working out and then going to spring training, I guess maybe that'll be sort of the saving grace is the 3 weeks of spring training that these players can, quote unquote, knock the rust off. But yeah, I think you have to be, a little worried, even though, I know we'll get into it. You have the numbers last year after 60 games, the Dodgers had already kind of separated themselves from the pack. And I'm sure in 2017 as well, but hey, there was 2018 where they needed 163 games to win the NL West and get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So in the last 4 years, how many of those years do you think the Dodgers were the division leader after 60 games?
Well, I tweeted about 2019, so I know that one for sure. I would imagine 2017, just because that was a remarkable season, but also they had the summer run, so I'd have to look at forget when that started. How many years am I guessing between?
So 2016, 17, 18, and 19. Okay. So 4 years.
4 years.
So you've got 2019, you're going yes. Yeah. 2018, I think you're saying no.
No.
2017, you're on the fence.
I'll say 2 of the 4. Because 16, I think
the answer
they were
is
a little slow.
1 of the 4. 2019 is the only year they were the division leader after 60 games. Last year, they were 41-19, 7-game lead over every team in the National League at that point, 9-game lead in the division, which is absurd. 2018, they were 30-30, 6.5 back in the National League as a whole, 2 games back in the division. 2017, 35-25, so really good record, 2 games back in the division, tied for the wild card. 2016 was actually the worst year of the bunch. They were 32-38, somehow only 3 games back in the division and a game out of the wild card. But so, I mean, at first you look at 2019 and you're like, okay, 60 games, it's enough of a sample size. I mean, the Dodgers went on to win the division all 4 years. Now, as you've pointed out, one of those years was a little bit dicey. It took 163 games to figure it out. But we're talking about one season where they were 6 games under 500. Another season they were 500 out of 4. I mean, half the seasons they were not above 500, 60 games in. And so I do think there's reason for concern if you're the Dodgers. Again, it's a small sample size. 60 games sounds like a lot, but it's almost a third of what they're used to. And crazy things can happen in 60 games. Now, the Dodgers are really, really good. Someone pointed out that last year, basically, aside from the Nationals, the playoffs were set after 60 games. For the most part. And I think this person was essentially saying the middle is going to be a mess It's going to be congested. Wild card spots are going to be insane. But the theory is the best teams in the league are going to elevate themselves. The best teams are going to win their divisions. They're going to elevate themselves. That National League West is not great. We know that, so that's good. But it will be fascinating to see and to keep an eye on, because I do think 60 games is something to be worried about.
Yeah, there's no denying the Dodgers are head and shoulders the class of the National League West. And, I know the Nationals are obviously the reigning World Series champions, but the Dodgers pretty much are a top 2 team in the National League, if not the top team. But you and I have both followed this sport long enough to know that baseball inherently can get weird.
Yeah.
Unpredictable things happen in any given season all the time. And so now, like you were kind of explaining, you shrink it down to 60 games. That just kind of multiplies that variable tenfold.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess one thing I hadn't even thought about and hadn't even considered, but are we back to normal divisions in this current? I mean, the March agreement, it's one of those things I've kind of lost sight of. Or are we in 10-team divisions still?
No, I think they're keeping divisions normal. And
Okay.
So pretty much National League will play so the Dodgers will play everybody in the National League, and then they will play games against the AL West.
Okay.
That's the impression I've been under with everything.
Yeah, it feels like that is one of the things that slipped through. But I mean, you think about that's crazy. The Dodgers have to fly to New York. The Dodgers have to fly to Miami. Like, what? Like, it's insane. It's insane. So, anyways, well, I'll add in, I did a little research. The Wish sponsorship with the Lakers. You want to take a guess how much they're paying per year to have a Wish patch?
I remember what it was because we obviously wrote it for Lakers Nation. Was it? And okay, so I'll preface my answer by saying I know that it wasn't number 1 overall. Number 1 overall in the NBA was, I'm pretty sure, the Cleveland Cavaliers, because LeBron James was still there.
Okay.
But I will peg the Lakers at, I felt like it was either 20 or 30 million a year.
Is $12 to $14 million per year, I believe.
Well, okay. I way overshot it.
Yeah. So, but I mean, again, if the numbers are right and players are and that's, I mean, the Major League Baseball in theory most years is playing twice as many games on TV. Yeah. So the ratings, I mean, I don't know how that compares, but if we're saying it would have cost them $2 million in player salaries for a patch, I mean, it's nuts. So, yeah, anyways. Well, there you go. I mean, that's a lot to digest with everything that's going on. As you said, we have not crossed the finish line yet. There are health and safety protocols that need to be signed off on. And if the last 2 months has taught us anything, it is that never assume that anybody agrees about anything. I mean, that was like an 85-page document or whatever. And so you'd hope that amongst everything Manfred and Clark have talked about, that this is kind of wasn't going to get put to the side if there were major issues. That seems to be the case. But we'll see. So if everything goes right, as you said, July 1st, players are going to start reporting. At the end of July, we're going to have baseball. It'll be in empty stadiums, of course. We have no idea necessarily what the schedule will look like, but baseball is coming back. And as a show that talks about baseball and which started in the midst of quarantine, essentially, we are so grateful. If this is the last week that I ever have to talk about these negotiations, I will be so grateful. I'm sure all of you will be grateful. And hopefully we can get on talking about baseball. So there you have it. 2020 baseball is coming back. Let me give you one more bit of news kind of as we wind this thing down. Some good news for the Dodgers. Last night was the ESPYs on ESPN, and the Dodgers won the Humanitarian Team of the Year for the Dodger Foundation's efforts to address issues facing the LA community. They noted during the COVID-19 pandemic, the foundation has donated almost 280,000 meals, roughly $660,000 in in-kind donation to help vulnerable populations facing homelessness, food insecurity, lack of basic needs, etc. One thing that's cool, I didn't realize this, the award itself comes with $100,000, which is awesome. Here's what the CEO of the Dodger Foundation, Nicole Whiteman, said. The Dodger Foundation was built for this moment in time. The trauma of a pandemic and social justice events has exacerbated the significant disparities in our communities. We know that inequality can only be dismantled through proactive and strategic interventions, and we're starting with the root causes. This award is a celebration of our organization's accomplishments, but we are far from done. The Dodger Foundation will not waver. We will be part of a solution. In addition to everything else, they support 100 nonprofits every year. They serve 10,000 youth through Dodgers RBI. They provide 368,000 children access to safe, playable spaces through Dodger Dream Fields, among others. I mean, it's amazing. So congratulations to the Dodgers and the Dodger Foundation for all that they do in our community. It's a wonderful thing. I mean, among all the awards the ESPYs give out, aside from the Arthur Ashe Award, which went to Nelson Cruz, I believe, this has to be among the most amazing ones to win. So congrats to the Dodgers. That'll do it for us tonight. That's Matt. I'm Jeff. As always, check us out, DodgerBlue.com. We've got the latest on everything, so you can keep up to date on the latest on spring training and all the reporting dates, all that kind of thing. Follow us on social media. As Matt said, there's going to be a giveaway of some amazing gear from Justin and Courtney Turner's deal. You can follow us at DodgerBlue1958 on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, etc. We love you. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your day.